Hi, in this video, we're going to cover the exam techniques for the IB Economics HL paper 2025. In this video, we're going to take a look at the different types of exam papers, what's changed from the past, what's new, what's been taken away. We're going to talk about time allocations, how much time you should spend towards each question. We're going to cover question and answer techniques. So we're going to talk about how you should approach any of these questions, what you should look for, what you should focus on, and then just some information on how many past papers you can practice for them, so that you have enough practice on the new format before your final exam. So first, the IB Economics HL syllabus has three papers, paper 1, 2, and 3. Paper 1 is largely theory based. Paper 2 is focused more on application because they give you case studies. And paper 3 has mostly calculation parts, with one essay style question at the end. So first with paper 1. Now, paper 1 is an hour and 15 minutes long, and you only have to answer 1 out of 3 questions. This is something that has changed. Before. You would have to do 2 questions out of 4. But now it's only 1 question out of 3. Now, each of these questions has 2 parts, a part A and a part B. The first question is usually related to microeconomics, the second question related to macroeconomics, and the third one is related to international trade and economic development. So you have the option here to pick which question you want to go for, and usually it's obviously a good idea to choose the part of the syllabus that you're most comfortable with. So if you understand macroeconomics better, go for that question. If you feel like you've done international trade more recently and that topic is more fresh on your mind, feel free to pick that. The total marks is 25 marks. So we have 10 marks for part A and 15 marks for part B. In terms of time allocation, you want to spend 35 minutes roughly for part A and 40 minutes on part B. Now, remember though that for both of these, you want to take away 5 minutes. And with these 5 minutes, what you want to do is spend your time planning your answer. What this allows you to do is for these 5 minutes, all you do is plan. Think of everything you can think of, right? And put your thoughts down in bullet points. Then you can figure out what you want to talk about. You can figure out how you want to place it. So what comes first, what comes second, what comes third, and so on. You can eliminate any points which you feel like you're not entirely sure of, that you can argue properly or fully, and also anything that you might think is irrelevant, you can take that away as well. What this then allows you to do is you take the rest of your time, so 30 minutes for part A and 35 minutes for part B, to literally just write your answer. You don't have to think about what you're writing because you've already made a plan for it. This is usually a good idea in terms of time management, which is very crucial for this paper since there's not a lot of time. Next, you want to be aware of the command terms. So usually the 10-mark question or part A is either going to have the explain or discuss command term, which we can see over here. So here we can see that for all questions, part A is explain, part B, evaluate, again, explain, again, discuss, explain, discuss. So these are the most common command terms. This is usually what's going to come up for paper 1. So what does that mean? Now, when it comes to explain, you want to argue the concepts. So advantages, disadvantages, any definitions, diagrams, and everything. but you don't have to give your evaluation or your content. You don't have to provide your own judgment. You don't have to provide your own opinion. You just have to explain the concepts. That's it. For the 15 mark questions, the only thing that is different, or a couple of things that are different. First, you have to use real world examples. So you ideally want to have a list of real world examples that you've already made. Um, or you could ask your HKExcel tutor if they have a booklet or if they have a source that they can share with you so that you can have that list ready or a couple of things just memorized so that you can always use them for microeconomics, macroeconomics, international trade. The other thing is that because this is evaluate, obviously, you not only want to argue your points, so not just your advantages and disadvantages, but you also want to talk about your opinion on these arguments. So, for example, you're saying that, okay, this particular thing is good or an advantage of this is so and so and so. Then you also want to go the extra step and evaluate. So, what you want to do here is judge whether or not what you've just said will be good or is applicable to the real life example you've put forward, right? So, for example, if you have this question here, evaluate the view that profit maximization is a firm's main objective, right? So, yes, obviously, you want to argue points that profit maximization is their objective and why that's a good thing. So, for instance, it makes the market more efficient because firms that are motivated with profit maximization will make the most efficient use of resources. However, that is not necessarily the case in, let's say, a monopoly market where there's only one firm. And so, because there's no competition, it's not necessary that the firm will make the most efficient use of resources. So, to add this follow up, that is your content. Other than that, here we have discuss for the 15 mark questions. Here as well, uh, you don't necessarily have to put your um, judgment or opinion, but in a situation where you're asked to discuss, you definitely want to argue both positives and negatives or advantages and disadvantages, and essentially critically analyze the topic. In this case, the view that high unemployment is a greater problem than high inflation, or in this case, the advantages and disadvantages of joining a monetary union, right? So the main difference between the 10 and 15 mark question is you need to add a little bit more critical analysis to the analysis section. The other thing is that your conclusion needs to be more in depth. So in a 10 mark question, you just repeat all the arguments you've made and just summarize the answer. That's it. For a 15 mark question, you do the same thing. You repeat the main points of your arguments that you've made in the analysis section, and then you simply put a final statement of whether or not you agree or disagree with the point. Okay. Some exam tips. First of all, scan the questions, read through them all, figure out which one you want to do. Of course, allocate 5 minutes to plan out your answer, create a booklet, or ask your tutor for more information. Make sure you have a minimum of 4 arguments in your analysis section. Follow the 3 C's. So in this case, context doesn't necessarily apply. That applies to paper 2. So make sure you have your concepts and your content. Your concept is your economic concepts that you've learned throughout your IB syllabus. And content is the evaluation, your critical analysis, your judgment, your opinion that you provide. In terms of practicing, it's only really the format of the paper that's changed. The questions themselves, the markings or the marks for the questions have not changed. So feel free to practice at least the last 5 years. So May, June, October, November. If you can get your hands on different time zones, feel free to do that as well, just so that you get in enough practice. And remember, don't just bullet point your answers, write the whole thing because it'll help you practice your time management and improve the quality of your essays. Next up is paper 2. So for paper 2, you get a total time of an hour and 45 minutes to answer one of 2 questions. So this has also changed. Before paper 2, you would also get 4 questions. You would have to answer 2 out of the 4, and those would be either related to international trade or economic development. That has now changed to basically what these case studies provide is information on anything throughout the syllabus. So micro, macro, international, it all applies. But you only have to answer one question. That one question is worth a total of 40 marks. And the way you want to allocate your time is you want to spend about 25 minutes to read through the case study. While you're doing this, you want to make sure you mark and highlight any key points that you feel would be relevant to answer the follow-up questions, and I'll explain how that works. Next, you want to allocate 15 minutes for answering part A and part B, 25 minutes for answering parts C to F, and then 40 minutes to answer part G, which is going to be a long essay style question. So here you can see this is paper 2, and here's the case study that they provide, and usually it's about 2 to 3 pages long. So that's why you want to allocate the time that I've mentioned above. However, one thing that you can do sort of to hack this is instead of reading the whole thing right in the beginning, first of all, you want to choose which question you want to do. So go through the questions. Look through here. If you're more comfortable with these set of questions, pick that. Or then go to the next section, read through these questions. If you're more comfortable here, choose this. The next thing that you want to do is actually start answering these questions. So answer question A, B, C, D, E, F. All right. While you're doing these, notice that these questions have references throughout them. What you can do is you can use these references as a way to read the case study or familiarize yourself with the case study in parts. So by answering those questions first and only reading that particular part. So for example, define monetary policy, text A, paragraph 1, we just go up to text A and we just read only paragraph 1. Based on this, you get some information, you know what the case study is talking about a little bit, and you can very easily define monetary policy in a couple of minutes. Go through the rest of these in the same way. The questions are slightly different. For part B, there's a bit of calculation and a drawing of a diagram. For part C, D, E, and F, you want to draw a diagram and provide diagram explanations. And so by doing this and reading the references bit by bit, you can get a bigger picture slowly. Finally, when you come to part G, the 15-mark question, make sure you read the question first so you know what you need to look for. Once you understand the question, go back to the case study from the beginning and read through everything. While you're doing that, what you want to do is highlight and mark the points from the case study that you feel will be relevant, right? So 7% annual economic growth seems relevant. Then annual inflation rate of 4% to 7.8% in 2022 seems relevant. Then the FDI inflows could help finance their large current account deficit, right? These are all facts that the case study provides that you can use for your arguments. The reason why this is important is because in this case, you're going to want to use the 3Cs. Now, the 3Cs are concept, context, and finally content. Remember, this is a 15-mark question. Even though it is discuss or it could be evaluate, the command term, you want to provide critical analysis. You want to provide your opinions. You want to provide your arguments in a more finessed way. So concept, this is just whatever you've learned from your textbook, right? Macro, micro, international economic development. Context is what you're picking out from the case study. This is what you're marking. This is what you're highlighting, because these are the points you're going to make with reference to the case study. Do not make a conceptual argument which does not have a context for you to refer to. Your argument could be theoretically correct. No doubt about that. But if you cannot connect it to the case study, if you don't have context for your argument, you automatically are making an irrelevant argument. You don't get marks for it. Finally, when you've made that argument, so you've made the reference to the case study, you've said the advantage or you've said the disadvantage, create your content. Give your opinion. Does it work? Is it going to be effective? How likely is it that this will actually work? What are the chances of it not working? Why do you think so? If you want to make another reference to counter argue what you've just argued, go for it. So yeah, the 3Cs, these apply to every single argument. So you're going to do at least a total of 4 arguments, right? So 2 advantages, 2 disadvantages, 3 advantages, 1 disadvantage, or vice versa. But make sure you would have at least 1 argument on both sides, 1 argument for, 1 argument against. Ideally, you want them to be balanced. So 2 plus 2 is the best way to go. For each and every one of these, your 3Cs have to apply for every single argument. And then, again, your conclusion, you just summarize and give your final opinion, and then you're done. For exam tips, we've basically covered everything. And even for this paper, practice everything from the last 5 years, because again, it's mainly the format of the question that's changed. Syllabus wise, yes, now it includes all micro, macro, and international, but again, it's still the same, regardless of what you do. The 15-mark question, you're already going to get practice from paper 1. In this case, or in this context, you want to make sure you also do practice the case study, right? Extracting the information is also important. Finally, we have paper 3, which is 1 hour and 45 minutes, where you have to answer 2 of 2 questions. So you want to allocate about 50 to 52 minutes for each of the questions, where you break that down into 25 minutes for the 10-mark question, the essay question in the end. And then the remaining 25 to 27 minutes you can allocate on the rest of the questions. Now, if you can take some time out from the rest of the questions and put it into the 10 mark, that's great. But again, don't rush your work. In this paper, rushing will probably mean you make a calculation error. This is a list of the command terms that you're going to come across, largely similar. Define and describe are your shorter, easier ones. Just 2 marks. Calculate and determine, also the same. Sketch and draw are going to be for your diagram, plus diagram explanation questions. And then the larger ones will be explain and discuss or recommend. For this paper, again, you want to make sure you answer the questions that you're most confident about. Because if you waste time trying to figure out the answer to the questions that you're stuck on, then there's a good chance you're not going to be able to finish your paper on time. For your 10-mark question, you want to again mark and highlight important points that you're going to be reading through, and I'll show you what that is in a second. And again, practice every paper from the last 5 years because, again, for the 10-mark question, it'll be largely similar to the paper one with reference to case study from paper two. But for the calculation questions, it's going to be all the same as it's been for a while. So here we have a paper three. The defined terms are going to be easy. And again, the way you want to answer or how much you want to answer, you can gauge by the marks and, of course, the size of the box given to you. If the box is small, if it's a few marks, you don't have to put too much in. But if it's a larger box or higher marks, like for example, well, this one here, this means there's blank space given to you for a diagram plus some explanation at the bottom. And then finally, the 10-mark question, which comes right at the end, you have here. And so here they give you plenty of space to make your arguments. The format is going to be the same. So make sure you have your 3Cs. Make sure you have enough references to this information in the case study, and then provide your final conclusion. In this case, that conclusion will be recommend a policy. So you're going to talk about a couple of things that they can do, and then finally give your opinion on what they should be doing. So that's pretty much everything for Economics HL. Please feel free to contact HKExcel if you want more tips. The tutors are happy to help.